Damien was a boy so beautiful that anyone who met him fell instantly in love with him. This was true for men, women and children alike. It's possible that even animals, anecdotal evidence suggests certainly dogs and cats, but also the occasional tortoise, felt a stronger than usual attraction to Damien and would seek his proximity rather than avoid it. Damien was not unaware of this power he exercised over other people, indeed other creatures, but his awareness was an intuitive one, and Damien would not have been able to put it to any practical or intentional use. Damien to Damien looked pretty much normal, and he took no great account of his appearance and checked himself rarely in the mirror. Even when he walked past a shop window, for example, or caught himself captured on the screen of a security camera, he would never pause or do a double take. The same could not be said of everybody else. Damien was used to this also, and it did not seem particularly strange to him that when he walked down a street, people would often stop and blatantly stare at him. It was not unusual, for instance, for two elderly ladies out together at the sales to interrupt their chatter or their scrutiny of a yellow hat, turn their heads and instinctively hold on to each other's hands as they both experienced that same identical sensation. God, isn't he beautiful? Women generally found this phenomenon easier to cope with inside themselves than men who, with some obvious exceptions, tended to be thoroughly bewildered and often remained confused for the rest of their lives. In one case, death occurred to a young man in his early 20s who had been working on the scaffold of a large building site on Regent Street. He was sitting on the wooden planks, legs dangling in the air, enjoying a cheese and ham salad sandwich on white bread and a cup of coffee, when Damien walked past a good 30 feet below, minding his own business. The young builder and his workmates had spent their lunch break watching the pedestrians beneath them, and if the person walking by was a foxy woman or a sexy girl, or sometimes even, and this they would consider jest, an exceptionally fit young man, they would whistle and maybe catcall, or make compliments or rude comments, or laugh raucously from the elevated safety of their viewing platform. Damien was walking at his ordinary pace, which was a slow one, slow certainly compared to the average walking pace in central London, and he stopped briefly outside Gerrard's, the Crown Jewellers, who had on display in their window an unusual assortment of watches and precious artifacts, none of which carried a price tag, but every one of which looked extremely expensive, much more expensive at any rate than Damien would have supposed ever to be in a position to afford. He therefore lent attention for a very short moment only to the curious mixture of exquisite craftsmanship and vulgar ostentation on offer before walking on. The men on the scaffold were all silent. They were all looking at Damien, but not one of them whistled or shouted or catcalled. Sean, the young man in his 20s, was sitting furthest to the right, and as Damien continued his walk up Regent Street, he was able longest to follow what he could give no name to, but what otherwise almost certainly would have to be called an apparition. Oblivious to the fact that all his mates were by now staring at him, he therefore craned his head forward, holding on firmly to the iron pole on his immediate right, whilst bending forward, far forward, over his legs, between which he had wedged his coffee cup. The foreman, who was at 34, by some margin the oldest of the group, had managed first to take his eyes off Damien, and he now said to Sean, loudly, but not shouting, and disallowing any sarcasm to colour his voice, if anything showing genuine concern for Sean's general well-being, "Oi, Sean, snap out of it." Hearing his name pronounced with such grave worry, Sean started, turned around abruptly, and veritably snapped out of whatever he was in, some trance, some suspension of reality, and banged his head against the iron bar that ran across before him at what would be about hip level of your average scaffolder. This sent a reaction of both pain and surprise through his body, which caused him to squeeze his legs and therefore the styrofoam cup that he held plied between them, spilling the now lukewarm coffee over his workman's overall. Triggered by this, he immediately relaxed and spread his legs, which allowed the cup to drop the 30+ feet down on the pavement, where it narrowly missed a pincher attached to a middle-aged Spanish lady, who was at that moment admiring the precise watches Damien had looked at just a few seconds ago. The pincher started yapping, but this did not last long, because in an instant he was silenced, flattened by Sean, who, in a reflex motion, had let go of the pole to his right, trying to catch the cup with it, because in his left hand he was still holding a cheese, ham and salad creation, 2/3 ingested. Sean landed atop the hapless dog with such force that the poor animal's brains squirted out of his head as a gooey substance and splattered against the Spanish signora's light beige stockings. The signora screamed in a hysterical fit, which was to last for several minutes unabated. Staff from the jewellers, whose wares both she and Damien had spent moments examining, came rushing out of their shop to discover the cause of this spine-chilling noise and the heavy thud that had preceded it. This, incidentally, allowed an opportunistic customer of hitherto immaculate record to make off with a trinket of not insubstantial value, which he had been in the process of purchasing for his charming young fiancée-to-be. Their relationship, alas, didn't last. An unguarded remark several years later betrayed the questionable origins of the present and set in motion a whole series of events and disputes which was ultimately to result in acrimonious divorce proceedings far more costly than the object involved. Sean was dead the moment his short-cropped skull hit the pavement with a disturbing crack, and he ended up lying sprawled on the floor in a surreally gyrated position, his left hand still clutching cheese, ham and salad, pointlessly sandwiched. All Damien would ever know of this unfortunate incident was the piercing sound of an ambulance screeching past the pedestrian island he was by then standing on, a good 3/4 mile up the road. Further down, the sight of pedestrians walking towards him, and thus towards the scene of the accident, stopping in their tracks with expressions shocked and awed at the same time, and going perceptibly pale, was so common to Damien's everyday frame of experience that he hadn't even noticed it. It will come as no surprise that if Damien had such a profound effect on the lives of complete strangers at unusual angles, his impact on meeting face to face was considerable.